I'm going to switch over to our spot screen here. If everybody's got the text and chat numbers, email address. So I've got Spot open here, and before we even start looking at the program, we had a question about somebody that indicated that they had to redo their white balance every time they opened the program up. Typically, that's a problem with your permissions. In the old days, you used to either have admin privileges for a computer or you didn't. And most of you have already experienced, I think, where your IT team's very restrictive about admin rights and typically won't give you full admin rights to your own computer. In Windows 10, and maybe some earlier versions of Windows, they can give you permissions just to a single folder. So in this case, if you're having problems where it's not remembering settings that you gave it the day before, that you want to make sure that your IT group has given you full permissions to the Spot Imaging Solutions folder on your hard drive. 99% of the time, that's been the problem when it's not remembering simple things like white balance. In fact, white balance is the one that there's the most common problem with. Permissions just to the Spot Imaging Solutions folder should cure that, and I don't think that your IT group should be too concerned about just giving you permissions for that one folder. And now if you'll give me a minute, I'm going to open Spot up. I want you to see a couple things when Spot opens here. So one of the first things you'll see is that when you try to open the program, you're given a choice between Spot Basic and Spot Advanced. Spot Basic is the program that I think most of you are used to using and is the program that you've paid for. They provide Spot Advanced to you for a 30-day trial, and if you want, you're more than welcome to open things in Spot Advanced. If you got questions about Spot Advanced, call me separately or reach out to me through an email or chat, and we can walk you through that. Advanced software is about a $600 upgrade if anybody's interested in it. So for today, we're going to cover Basic. That's the yellow one that you see here. If you're always going to use Basic and you don't want to mess around with Spot Advanced at all, there's a little box you can click that says Do Not Ask Me Again. For today, I'm just going to click on that and open it. And you can't see it right now. It's opening in my other monitor. And I'm going to, as it opens here, bring it over for you all. Perfect. Did open over here. So, first thing that you see is that Spot closed down the way I left it. So this is my control window right here, and I'm going to shut that for a moment. And this is my live imaging window. I think most of you are familiar with it. I'm just going to run down the icons that we have across the top of the page. The first one here in the upper left-hand corner is the movie camera. That's created the screen that we see right here. And I'm going to come in and minimize the screen. The reason I was minimizing this is there's something very important on your screen here. I suspect most of you, if you've got a fast enough computer, this camera is moving at many more frames per second than what you're used to. Typical live image on your old Spot camera was somewhere between 12 and 20 frames per second. My camera right now is currently running 61 frames a second. And the problem at 61 frames a second is that you're actually seeing fluorescent light turn on and off. It's a 60 hertz bulb, and it literally is turning on and off 60 times a second. Most of you aren't seeing a black image and then a white image. You may be seeing a image that goes bright, dim. Some have called it a rolling brightness change. At any rate, there's a little button down here in the lower left corner of my live screen that says flicker reduction. And when you click on that, hopefully that should now give you a image with more constant or homogeneous illumination. There is a button there that you can slide back and forth if it's not balancing out all of that brightness change. But again, in most cases, you're not going to need to touch it at all. I also want to let you know there's a little button down here that says acceleration. I suspect if I click on it, the whole program's going to shut down. There'll be a new version of Spot coming out shortly, and this camera doesn't have an acceleration function in its chip design. All right, so now we got our image open. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to move to the fourth icon over, and it looks to me like a little equalizer, if you will, but that's going to pull up all of my controls. Let's take a minute. I'll just name the icons. We're going to go through some of them, and a couple of them we're just going to ignore. The first one here is the live video, and it looks like an old-fashioned movie camera. Next is what looks like a 35mm picture, and anytime I click on that, that's going to give me an image of what I saw on my live screen. Next comes a magical button called HDR, and we're going to look at that in a little bit, but for the moment we're going to leave that one alone. The next one is acquiring time-lapse images. We don't have biological samples. They're not changing over time. I don't think there's any reason that you want to grab time-lapse images. If somebody has a reason to, they're certainly more than welcome. You can either go to the Help About Spot and ask questions, or you can also go to the Spot Imaging website and download a complete manual. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the image settings, and I'm going to go back and click on my live. Okay, just so that you can see that's live. That's my fingers running in front of that breech face. And the first and most important thing is the colors are all wrong. Unless we got special Christmas time brass, we're not going to see it. So you can't see what I'm doing at the moment, but I'm putting a big wax platen on, and I'm dropping a piece of white paper in front of that camera. And I'm going to click on what looks like a little colored donut. It is to the right of the image settings controls that we brought up. And when we click on this, it's going to give us a little box that says, hey, put something white underneath there, and when you're ready, tell me to go. And we do, and we hit begin. And now we've got white. When I take the white off and go back to my breech face image, suddenly everything's the right color for us. Some of you have indicated to me that every time you start the program, you've got to re-white balance things. Once again, the reason it's not remembering your white balance is that you don't have admin privileges for the Spot folder. You're going to want to talk to your IT group and have them send you or have them give you permissions for the Spot Imaging Solutions folder, which is on your C drive. Give me 1 second. What's up?
Try doing the flicker reduction and moving the slider bar. My color is still going back and forth.
The flicker reduction should be taking care of the bright, dark that you were seeing. And if you're having problems with it remembering your white balance, even while we're working here today, I will make shoot Everett a good phone number for you, and we'll give you a call when we get done with this training and try to deal with your issues separately. And that goes for everybody. My cell number is there. You've got Everett's email. Most of you have my email. Don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to help people one-on-one or deal with any issues that you might have coming up. Okay? So we've now got an image. Hopefully for most of you, the flicker reduction's working. And you can see that I have a nice brass color. The issue that I have is that I have two types of light. I've got fluorescent light, which as you see produces a very green image. That has to do with the mercury gas. If anybody's familiar with the mercury spectrum, it has to do with the gas inside your fluorescent lights, which is the reason you don't want to throw them in the garbage. Any CFLs or fluorescents you have really should be recycled. So as you can see there, I've got good color for my fluorescent, and I'm going to step away for a second here again, and I'm now going to go to the other side where I have a sample that you can't see. So I'm going to make that a little brighter if you give me a minute here. Went into exposure here, and I went into brightness. You maybe can't tell perfectly, but this light is rather blue. You can see that the center primer here, instead of being silver, looks blue. And if I go put a white card under the side that's illuminated with the LED fiber optics, what we end up with is not a white card, but a blue card. So maybe you don't use the fiber optic light so often, and for that you could just white balance when you get there. I prefer a little different solution, and I like to create image profiles. So if we come up to the top of our image settings here, you'll see something that says profile, and currently it reads untitled. What I want to do is create 2 new profiles, and I do that by hitting the add button. And the first one we're going to call fluorescent, and it's asking me, do I want to use the settings from the current profile, and I'm going to say OK. Do you want to save changes to untitled? No, it really doesn't matter at this point, so I'm just going to say no. I'm not really going to use that often. And I'm going to go back now to my fluorescent light. It's got the right white balance to it, and I'm going to hit save. Now, whenever I am going to use the fluorescent lighting, if I have permissions to the spot imaging folder and I've selected fluorescent, if I previously white balanced it, then it'll be white balanced again when you open it up. If it's not, that's where we need those permissions to that folder. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I want to add another light source, and we're going to call this one fiber optic LED. We're going to say OK to that. But when I go over here and image my fiber optics, I notice that, again, I have this blue color to it. So I'm going to again put a white card underneath here. I'm going to go back up to my little colored donut up here. Click on that. Again, I get a dialog box. I haven't read it for years, but basically it says put something white under here. Tell me when you're ready. So we've got something white under. We hit begin, and it's already saved it. Okay, so now we've got a correct color for our fiber optic illumination, as well as a correct color for our fluorescent light when we select fluorescent. It's asking me, do you want to change stuff on the LED one before you leave? And we're going to say yes, so it remembers that white balance. And there we are on the fluorescent side. So now I can quickly change between light sources and determine or have the right white balance, and I'm ready to go. I'm not going to take you through all of the controls, since hopefully most of you have played with this before. There's 2 or 3 tabs on here that are important to us. So the first one is appearance. And under appearance, there's gamma, contrast, saturation, and color temperature. And you can play with this. The 2 that are important to me out of this are gamma. And what gamma is going to do is cut down some of your dynamic range. But for example, here, if I had a feature in the dark area, you can see by pulling gamma to the right, I've made it brighter, if you will. I can also come and take the gamma the other direction, and if I had something that was in one of the washed out or bright areas, I could darken the image so that we might be able to see them. Gamma is a sacrificial technique. Usually you're trying to pick something very specific out of the sample and highlight it. You can see it in the microscope, but the camera and our eyes see things differently, and therefore we might need to use gamma to highlight that. Contrast, you can play with. It's just in a similar fashion going to make things brighter or darker. Saturation's all about messing with color saturation, and color temperature is going to change so that our white sample's no longer white anymore. So if you play with all that, you don't like that, just hit use default, takes us back to where we are. Okay. Next tab that we have on our image settings here is exposure. You're going to see here that we've got a brightness control. It's going to be the most common control you're going to use for capturing your images, and to the right the image becomes brighter, and to the left it becomes darker. Gain is something that we've used in the past. To remind you what gain will do, gain basically increases the sensitivity of the camera, and while it does that, it also increases the amount of noise. So if we were to go and capture this image and look at it in these fine detail areas, we might see some multicolored dots. That is the function or the result of the noise that we brought up when we increased the gain. The only reason we'd touch gain is if we weren't able to get the picture to move fast enough or follow my movements fast enough so that I was able to focus a live image. And gotta bring my live image back up, forgive me. I'm going to resize this box, and because I have permissions, the next time I open fluorescent, it's going to appear like this. Number one, the new camera is much faster. I don't think you'll need gain as much as maybe you did in the past. I'm going to focus the microscope here, and as long as the microscope's moving with me in real time, I don't feel like I need gain. You might have a very non-reflective image, and the computer might come back with something like image too dim, and that would be one of the cases where you would raise that gain up. It would make the camera more sensitive, and then you should be able to drop gain back to 1 or close to 1 to minimize the noise when you're ready to take a picture. By the way, one of the questions that I get asked very commonly, and I don't get all the direct feedback from you, is this stupid blue line in the corner. That blue line is trying to define focus. It's supposed to be a focus gauge with the idea that if you go in and out of focus, you will find a spot, which is the red line, which was the peak focus, if you will. Our samples are so three-dimensional, it really doesn't work. And as you may or may not know, low power pictures are very hard to take. So where maybe you would want to use a focus gauge, I would actually recommend to you that you zoom up to a higher magnification. In this case, I'm going to try to focus on this firing pin, and then zoom back out and know that when I took that picture that the firing pin impression would be in focus. The rest of it may or may not be. So that's exposure. I'm going to jump ahead. We're talking about the blue line here. There's 2 ways that you could use this focus gauge if you wanted. Number one, you can simply use it as it is and it's trying to determine the best focus across your full field of view. I only tell you that because it's going to include these little Delrin knobbies here from your universal holder and try to bring those in focus at the same time. In most cases, people tell me they just want to turn it off. So I've gone to the Focus tab, and you'll see the first little box that I can check says Show Focus Gauge. So I'm going to turn it off, and magically it disappears. It's no longer blinking in your right side of your image. You also have the ability here to, in the first position where there's a pink box that says focus in area. The first checkbox below that is the same as the imaging area, which is what I described to you. That blue gauge is trying to best decide when your best focus is occurring, which in this case is probably hard to do. We've got these parts of our universal holder that are at one height, the breech face is at another height, and the firing pin is at yet another. Under that focusing area in the pink box, there's also something that says selection, and then right next to it, it says set area. So if you look at it, I've got a regular cursor right now, and when I go in to hit set area, it says I can click and drag the mouse. So I could, for example, again, assuming that I wanted to focus on that firing pin, now that blue bar is only going to look at the area inside the pink box to decide where the best focus is. Okay, and it's something about like that. I again just find this blue bar to be distracting and I turn it off, but that's certainly up to you to use at your own discretion. Other tab that I want to show you, we've looked at appearance, where we looked at contrast and gamma. We've looked at exposure, which is where we control our brightness, and if we need to, we give the camera some additional sensitivity by upping the gain. The next one is called HDR. Acronym stands for High Dynamic Range. And what the camera is going to do is try to take a number of exposures and provide the best exposure that it can across the whole face of the part. In a case like we have here, what it's probably going to do for us on this breech face image is potentially take out the bright spots, the highlights that you see in that image. It's going through and taking multiple exposures right now, and it's processing, so it takes a little bit longer. And here's the new image that it's provided for us. I'm sorry, right here, upper left corner. So you can see that it's taken some of the highlights out, given us a more even illumination across the breech face. So it's got a nice effect there on the breech face, but to me the place where it's most significant is when we look at a sidewall of a cartridge case or a shiny bullet. And if you give me 1 second, I'm over working on the LCF here, changing the sample that we're looking at. And opening up my live window again. So in this particular case, we get what I call the classic skunk stripe. So we have this very bright area at the top, the apex of this cylinder that we're looking at, and quickly the image goes dark on either side. I can come into my exposure here and take my brightness down, but when I take my brightness down so I'm not staring at the overly bright skunk stripe, I lose all the highlights on the what I like to call the dark sides of the moon. So the area to the right and the left of the Skunk Stripe. You'll find now when I hit this magic HDR button here, it's going to go through. Takes just a minute. And again, our new image is up here in the upper left corner. And you can see it's done it's improved the illumination levels across the cartridge sidewall for us. Would do the same thing with a shiny bullet, and you saw what it did on the breech face. So HDR is a common feature. It's on most of our cell phones. It's on a lot of microscope imaging cameras today. What's really unique about it is, in our case, they've specifically designed it to work with cylindrical objects. So there's a very sophisticated menu that we can pull up here and come in and things to adjust and play with, and you can change those settings and see if you could improve on the type of imaging that we have created here. But in most cases, I think you're going to find that it's just a magic button. You just press it and boom, gives you a good image out of it. I know most of you don't have the time to try to, I don't like the word manipulate, but to try to work with the computer and take a better picture. So we're trying to make this process as smooth and quick as we can. So that's that magic HDR button. In the process of installing this camera in other agencies, I've had problems where when I'm at very low magnification and I have I'm going to get a live image here again. I have an image much like you see on the live image screen right now. Sometimes it will come back and you will get an error message that says image too dim. And what's happening there is that in most cases that I've seen, your cartridge case is only occupying a portion of the field. Even as we see here, what happens when this region that we're trying to run the HDR on becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of the picture, what the computer's trying to decide is, can I get any light out of these black regions that are on either side of the sample when I'm in a normal live mode? So we'll go back to that. So it's trying to pull light out of even these dark areas. If you get something that says image too dim, this is the only time I've had to open up the HDR mode and manipulate it, and it has to do with a little box up here. It's the second big white box that you see if we start at the top, and it says last image. And when it says 80, what it's saying is I'm asking the computer to pull a high dynamic range image out of 80% of the picture. And if your bullet's only, or cartridge case is only 50 or 40%, it's basically trying to make an image or get an image out of an area that it probably never will be able to, which is why it's saying image too dim. So if you have that, again, the only time I've seen it so far is when we have a very small caliber cartridge case like a 22, and we're at low power and it might only be 30-40% of the field of view. I get something that says image too dim, and I come up here, open the HDR tab, and bring this number that's currently 80 down to say 50%, and I take an image or try to take an image. Again, if it comes back with image too dim, I just got to keep decreasing that range, and eventually you'll get it to the point that it will match and work. I was just asked a question that Everett got in, and it said, where should we set the illumination on the lower range? I don't know that I fully understand the question, but let me give you a couple examples. And I think if I understand the question, you're going to find that the HDR is probably going to compensate no matter what we do. When I did look at that breech face, I definitely lowered the illumination down before I took the HDR picture, but I'm not convinced I had to do that. So we're going to take the brightness way up here, and now we're going to ask it for an HDR picture. And let's see what it does. Hopefully I'm answering your question. What was the name? Was that Laura?
Yep, Laura Drago. Brightness, I mean.
Yep. I suspect that we may at times get a note that says image too dim or image too bright, and it could be related to that as well. So I just closed the lowest image, or the image that we had just taken. Forgive me. I thought we were looking at this image, and we were actually looking at a new image 6 that I just closed. So, all right, Kevin goofs up. This is where you get a laugh at me. We're going back to our live image. Here's the overly bright one. We're going to hit an HDR. Then in a minute I'll do a one where the illumination is probably lower than we would normally set it, and see if HDR will compensate for that. So far here is the newest HDR image. So when I had it set overly bright, it maybe made a little difference between the one here, image number 4, that was probably closer to I don't know what you want to say, a normal range. So the HDR was really able to compensate for too bright. Now we're going to go back in, get my live image again, and I'm going to go back to my controls, exposure, take that brightness way down the other way, give it a minute here and it'll react. And now we're going to take an HDR picture there. So I think what we're going to find is it within a certain range is going to deal with overly bright light, what we might call sort of a mid-range light, and then one that's probably overly dim. And I think that it's going to pull that out and equalize all that out. But that's what we're doing this experiment for. Here's the newest image. So this was too dark. And when I say was too dark, let's say it was darker than I would normally set it. Here's where I would have the illumination brighter than I would normally set it. And here is what we might call a mid-range setting. And the HDR was able to equalize all of that out. Hopefully that answers your question, Laura. If not, send me another one. The other thing I was going to show you all, I don't normally have my live window disappear when I capture an image. Oftentimes people are in a position where they want to take 3 or 4 images right in a row, maybe different magnifications, different lighting, and having that window disappear can be a pain. So I'm going to go up to the top menu here, and we haven't talked about it, but there's a menu here, and one of them says Setup. I'm going to go into Setup, hit Preferences. So under Image Acquisition, I have several choices of things that I can modify here. One, I can change the bit depth. This is an 8-bit camera. It's producing what people would call 8-bit, or some people would call 24-bit images. The idea is there's 8 bits of red, 8 bits of green, and 8 bits of blue. There are higher resolution images that are available as 10-bit and 12-bit, but those image formats, you're not even going to recognize the file type name. I think that TIFF is the only one that even carries over there. So next one is have it make a shutter sound every time you capture an image. If that bugs some of you, you can turn that off. And I'm going to uncheck the box that says Close Live Image Window on Acquisition. And say OK. And so now, when I go capture an image, oops, you'll see that my live window stays open. I don't know if you are all using text and annotation. I'm going to talk about that for just a minute. So again, going back up to the written menu up here, there is something that says File. This pretty much resembles, in my mind, a Microsoft type menu. This is where you would open an image file, open image file thumbnails. That'd be if you had a folder with 12 pictures in it. You could open them all up and they'd appear in a size that you could see them all at once. Image sequences, which we don't do. Report writing, a number of things that you see here. But the next one over, which is where I was trying to come, is the one that says Edit. And under Edit, there's things we could do where you could crop and paste images to a clipboard. You can flip the image around, which we don't need to. And you can play with, there's a thing where you can make the image negative, match colors, do all kinds of stuff, most of which people don't want to hear about. Some people are very eager and anxious to find out about annotation now. So when we hit Annotate, the menu up here, don't know whether you'll be able to notice it, has actually changed. So under Edit of Annotations, I would normally expect for there to be a toolbox. If somebody closed the toolbox down before they closed the Edit function down, then the toolbox is hidden. All I need to do is come to View and hit Show Tools. Oh, sorry, I'm dealing with two screens again. Forgive me. They showed up off our screen. So this is the toolbar. I'm going to close my live image. We can pull up one of these HDR images that we did. All right, there's Spot back. Let's get our tools back. Yep, and they're coming back the way that we left them. And go back to View. Somehow or another I clicked on, I'll show you how what I did in a little bit, but I got out of that annotation mode. So we're going to come back here once again and tell it to annotate. Again, we see things change up here, and we'll go through that in a minute. And now I've got a toolbox, and I can put arrows on things. If we have any of you that are old enough to remember John Madden and his teleprompter, you can draw around something, whatever you might want to do freehand. You can come in here and create a text box. I like to label my images so if I ever find them later, I know whether they were important enough to save. And you say, well, that's nice, Kevin. Whatever you typed up in the corner is too small. I can't even read it. So then we come up here to my new changed menu, and we go to Attributes and Text Font. And now we can, first of all, make that text larger. Still not large enough. Oops. So we're going to do text font again. It's a little better. I guess I could probably even make it bigger if I wanted to. You can see I put more junk there. If I find that later, I certainly can decide that I probably didn't intend to keep this picture. So these other things that I've put on here are not burned in, and we can currently come back and modify them. The annotation that's active is defined by these little white boxes here. And somehow or another I clicked off them. Okay, well, I'm coming back to my toolbar. I'm getting a regular cursor back, so I'm not trying to draw anything. And I've now clicked on this free draw that I did here. So I know it's active. It's got those 4 little white boxes on it. Could come up under attribute, and we could change the color of that line to, I don't know, maybe a nice vivid fuchsia. If there's any colorophiles out there. Oh, nice. Hold on, people. We had a power supply here yesterday, and I don't know what I did with it. That one's wired in. Go see if there's one sitting in my office. Maybe I put it in. Oh boy. Hang on. We're coming back with some power. I told you there'd be a time for you to laugh at me, and I guess we're at that time right now. Just making sure we don't have it sitting here. Okay. The thing is, when I want to get out of here, I have to come up, and there's a little note up here that says done, and I have to tell the computer that I am done with the annotation mode and I want to get out. So I click done here, and we've gone back to a normal menu up here again. Sorry, we got weird things going on here. I don't even know what this is. It's a zoom box. I didn't pick up a zoom box. Yeah, see? Hit magnifier. Sorry, that was a little disjointed. If we wanted to save this image, we could save this image, and as long as we opened it back up in Spot, we would be able to see our annotations and move and edit them still. If we were going to send this off to somebody who didn't have Spot software and we're going to view it with the imaging program that came with their computer, we need to merge those images together. So we come here under Edit, and under Edit down here at the bottom, I can merge objects. In this case, it's annotations. And those images are now burned in. I can't pull them off anymore. I can't do anything else with them. Those are kind of the highlights of features. Obviously, there's a lot of other information and functionality based in this program. But again, my experience has been most of you have a big backlog. It's important that you take pictures to show that you looked at things and saw things, but if somebody really needs detailed information, you've still got the evidence and they can pull it out and take a look at that. So are there questions, suggestions, things that people didn't understand that I could address or answer right now? Check my phone here. Okay, we can't see the top. That was 45 minutes ago. Oh, and I've reached my hour. Sorry. I figure if you got to listen to me talk for more than an hour, some of you got to be nodding off to sleep. So if there's additional questions, let's take those on here. If you've got specific problems that you want me to deal with one-on-one, I'm happy to help you there. We cannot talk for 9 months, and you can be trying to get a picture 9 months from now and have a question. Call me up. You got my cell phone. Our support is kind of never ending, and we'll do what we need to make things work for you.
Nothing coming in over here.
We're not seeing any questions, so I'm going to assume for the moment that that was somewhat successful.
Got one issue from Michael. The issue I have every so often is that image too dim when I start up the Spot software.
Well, with the exception of HDR, image too dim, sorry, I'm riding over my microphone cable, forgive me. Michael was?
Yep.
Michael, the image too dim could be a result of several things. First and foremost, the most common thing that we see is that we're not sending light to the camera. So we want to take a look at the photo tube or Trinoc we have. I think almost all of you have a photo tube, and there's a push-pull rod on that, whereby you can either choose all the light going to your eye or all the light going to your eye and your camera. Split between the two, if you will, which is the position we want. I suspect you've been using it long enough that you've got something other going on than that. Image too dim will occur when we don't have a good sample in focus. We're just staring at a dark region. Image too dim can happen when we try to take HDR pictures and the object that we're trying to take a picture of is a fraction of the size of your imaging window, a smaller fraction of the imaging window. I've actually seen sometimes where I think the camera needs 2 minutes to warm up, and I turn it on right away, and I get that image too dim. Let me pull the live menu back up here. Oops, not the live menu, the live image, forgive me. When you see that, again, you're probably familiar with it, but restart is a button here that's at the bottom of the lower controls that are at the bottom of the imaging window, and when I hit restart, it's going to ask the computer to go out and restart that, figure out what your exposure is again. If you're not doing anything and it's going away, we may just be asking the camera to perform before it's all warmed up and checked out. The other thing I was going to show you, I can't make it do it with this mouse, but if you have a scroll mouse and you have your cursor on top of your image and you scroll, you can change the magnification. And you can see there's a little box up here that tells me how much I've magnified or demagnified that image. The problem with it is it's hard to get back to a fit to window, which means that I'm seeing the whole image edge to edge, irregardless of what the zoom function is. And what I like to remind people is this little window is actually a pull-down menu. So right now it's reading 46.52%. So it's basically cut the image in half by, or a little more than half. But you'll also see that when I hover over it, I got the pull downs to show up, and right there is fit to window, and that's how we're going to most commonly want to run that image. So I'm sorry, that was just a common feature that I thought of while we had that live imaging window out. Michael, if that doesn't address your questions, then give me a call separately when you've got the microscope in an image to dim position, and you can put that up there. I'm also going to take a moment, if any of you haven't had the opportunity, one of the other reasons, besides this camera being made locally here in the United States, one of the other reasons I really, really like the Spot cameras is their customer service support. And the idea that they'll do special and unique things for leads like this HDR button for cylindrical samples. But their customer support lady is a lady named Tina, literally one of the best 2 or 3 customer service agents I've ever worked with in my life, privileged to work with. So their company number is 586-731-6000. And It's going to start out when the phone is answered with a recording that says if you know your extension, press 1. So we're going to press 1. And then Tina's extension is 32 pound. I have customers that call me up after Tina's helped them and taunt me with the idea that they went to Tina rather than me. I'm not offended in the least. Some have insisted that she's far more pleasant to talk to as a woman than me. Again, I would probably agree with that. So just know that Tina's there for support as well. When I reach my limit of knowledge dealing with a problem that you have, I'm going to send you to Tina. And certainly if I'm not available or you want to, you can certainly reach out to her as well. So hopefully that is another bit of information that'll just help this camera work for you that much easier, so that when you do have a problem, you've got multiple solutions to pursue.
We've got another question from John Romeo. Can Spot import pics automatically into Beast/Limbs program, specifically Porterly software? We are not there yet, but down the road.
John, I believe the answer to your question is yes. I don't think we've worked with the people from Beast before. I know that we worked with Justice Tracks. I think what's most important is that we work in standard image formats. So when we go to save an image, let's pull one up here. So we're going to close our live window and close our control window, and we're going to say we want to save this image here that I've merged. So we come up to File, Save As. Oh, why is this open? Yeah. Sorry. I can't.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing.
No, I know, but well, that time it did. Okay. So maybe more importantly than where I'm going to save this image right now is this idea that when I go to the types of files that you can save it at, none of these are proprietary. They're all standard image formats. So we've got a Windows bitmap, a couple different types of JPEG, what's called a PIC-T, a TIFF, JPEG, and a big TIFF. Maybe for any of you that are concerned, a big TIFF is the most complete file. There's no compression run on it. All the metadata is there. And again, it's a standard TIFF format. TIFF JPEG is trying to balance the resolution between a compressed JPEG image and a TIFF image. But then you'll see we've also got a standard TIFF, standard JPEG. So I would like to believe the answer is yes. If there is a problem, certainly have the people that are selling you the limb system reach out to us. In most cases, we put them in contact with diagnostics if there's any concerns, but we have not had any problems interfacing with at least one of the other limb systems, Justice Tracks, and I've had a couple other limb systems that people have asked me about and I never heard back from, so I'm assuming that they probably got things to work there. Other questions? Got anything else coming in?
Nothing.
Okay. I just checked my text and I don't have anything there. We don't have anything. How about on the YouTube chat window? You checked that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm going to thank you all for taking the time. Hope this went well. It's a little difficult for me. I feed off of the information I get back from you all. So to sit here and look at a blank screen and at least an audience screen and just my computer window is a little bit, I get less feedback. I don't know if I spoke as well, but hopefully that's answered your questions. As I've indicated, happy to help you one-on-one. Happy to have another session if there's some people from your group that missed it. We can always reach out to Tina. We're here for your support. So,
And this will be recorded.
did you hit record?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this should be recorded, I'm told. Margaret will probably pull it down and edit it a little bit, get rid of some of my ums and ahs, and then repost it, so it will be on YouTube, and I would hope we can put it on the Leeds Forensic page. If you're not familiar with that, Leeds Forensics has a page in YouTube, and we've done quite a number of, let's call them support type videos, show you how things work, type videos similar to this one. So thank you all for the time. Reach out to me if we got questions, send me an email. Everett's here to help. Tina's available. Let us know what you got to do. Thank you.